Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sisters in Crime Canada West's launch of its second anthology, Women of a Certain Age. I'm Charlotte Morganti, your host, along with Winona Kent. I will be monitoring the chat and the questions from all of you. We have a packed session tonight, and Therese Greenwood, a wonderful writer from my home province who is our moderator, is not afraid to use the hook if I run long. So let me turn things over to Therese. Rather than reading her bio, I'll let Therese tell you a bit about herself.
Hello, everyone. It's just such a pleasure to be with you tonight. And I just want to thank the Sisters in Crime West before I forget at the end, because we're always rushing at the end, for inviting me to moderate the panel. I appreciate it. And I think we're just going to have a fun night tonight. I'm a short crime fiction writer. I am the proud winner of the Spur Award from the Western Writers of America for my story Buck's Last Ride, which was in my anthology from Calgary's Coffin Hop Press, and the anthology is called Kill As You Go. And I'm also a three-time finalist for the Arthur Ellis Award, and I've won the CBC Mystery Plus Fiction Award, a few things like that. And my memoir, What You Take With You, Wildfire, Family, and the Road Home, which is about the Fort McMurray wildfire, was a finalist for the Alberta Book of the Year Award, nonfiction Book of the Year, a little outside of our realm. Again, as I said, I'm delighted to be here with you today. And because we're online today, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves so that you can identify their face and their voice and their introduction all in the same package. And I'm going to be going along the screen as I see people. So that's going to be so no one is going to know what the order is until I actually do it, I think. So first, I would like to ask Shelley Adina if she could introduce herself and also mention the name of her story in the anthology that we're talking about tonight. And Shelley, take it away. You're on the spot first.
You're muted.
I was going to say you might be muted.
Sorry, so much for being polite. My story in the Air Affair is, in the anthology is called The Air Affair, and it is a short prequel to my upcoming Lady Georgia Brunel mystery series, which will be launching in May. So about me, I have written more than 50 novels. I think I'm working on 54 right now, published by Harlequin, Warner, Hachette, and my own little press, Moonshell Books. Under Shelley Adina, I write steampunk adventure and mystery. As Charlotte Henry, I write classic Regency romance. And as Adina Senft, I am a USA Today best-selling author of Amish women's fiction. I have a PhD in creative writing from Lancaster University in the UK. And when I was with Romance Writers of America, I won the Rita Award and was a finalist. I've been in the 2016 documentary film Love Between the Covers, and I'm all over the place at conventions and panels and things, and podcasts, including World Shapers and Realm of Books.
Fantastic. Wow, that's wonderful, Shelley. I'm looking forward to you're going to have a lot to share with us tonight from a lot of different angles. I could see that. And next, I'm going to ask Miriam Dickon if she could introduce herself, mention the title of her story in the anthology, and tell us a little bit about herself.
Yep, thank you. My story in the anthology is titled Labor of Guilt. And I was born in the Netherlands and mostly for work have traveled around the world quite a bit. Lived in India for 3.5 years, which has a link to the story. And I now like to wander around in the darker places of my imagination to write. I live in Edmonton with my husband and children, and I work as an independent career coach and HR consultant. And my stories have appeared in anthologies and on beer cans. And in 2024, my first novel, a thriller, On the Other Side of the River, will be published by Stonehouse Publishing.
Oh, congratulations, Miriam. We'll be sure to keep an eye out for your first novel. That's what an achievement. And Elizabeth Elwood. Elizabeth, would you now introduce yourself, mention the name of your short story in the anthology, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my story in the anthology is called The Fair Rosalind and the Summer of Love. It's very light in tone. I've published 6 books in my Eerie Mystery series, which is about a family of sleuths in the Lower Mainland, one of whom is a singer, because
Okay.
in my youth, I used to sing in the opera chorus. I've also written a lot of stories for anthologies and magazines, and one of which was nominated for a Derringer Award, and one of which I was very honored to receive the Crime Writers of Canada Best Short Story this year. And I'm also a playwright. I've written 4 plays, which between them have had about 15 productions in different parts of Canada and the US.
Oh, well, we're seeing a wide variety of backgrounds and skills from our panelists today. CJ Papoutzis, could you go next and tell us a little bit about yourself and the name of your story as well?
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. My story is entitled No Traps, No Spray. It's kind of a cozy. I won't tell you too much because I don't think it was right. My name is CJ Papoutzis. I live in Victoria, BC, in a crooked old building on a crooked old street near the sea. My essays, short stories, and poems have been published in Monday Magazine, Senior Living Magazine, and 3 anthologies, Drop Threads 2, Blood on the Holly, and this wonderful one that we're dealing with tonight called Women of a Certain Age. I've also had some things published online at commuterlit.com and episode 7 of Stories Less Spoken.
Oh, I'm gonna go. I also have a story in Blood in the Holly. So after this is over, I'm gonna go back in and read your story again. CJ. And Laurie Wood, would you also tell us a little bit about yourself, the name of your short story, and anything else you'd like us to know?
Thanks, Therese. Yeah, the name of my short story is Natural Consequences, and all I'm going to say about it is that it's a dark story, probably one of the darker ones in the anthology. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, so I'm one of the more eastern parts of Canada West chapter. I'm the author of the Heroes of the Tundra series, which is available through Anaya Press and available widely. And I have 3 books out in that series: Northern Deception, Northern Hearts, and Northern Protector. And the 4th book, Northern Redemption, is coming out next year. And I'm also the membership vice president for Canada West Sisters in Crime chapter, the chapter that we're putting out the anthology tonight. So.
Oh, terrific. I live here in Fort McMurray, and the names of the titles of your book sort of describe my phases of life as I up here in Northern Alberta. Now I would like to ask Karen Abrahamson to introduce herself. And Karen, please, Karen is the wonderful genius, I'm going to say, behind the anthology, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how she chose the story and some of the decision-making process she had to make. And Karen, take it away.
Okay, first of all, setting things straight. No, I'm not a genius, and it wasn't me. Okay. It was a group effort. So my name's Karen Abrahamson. I write under the name, for mysteries anyway, KL Abrahamson. I'm the author of 30 plus novels, as well as short fiction that have been published in a variety of anthologies and magazines, including Ellery Queen. I've had 1 story nominated for a Derringer, and I was a finalist for the Author Ellis Certificate of Excellence for Crime Writers of Canada at one point. I was fortunate enough to be involved with editing the first anthology with Sisters in Crime, Canada West, and also with this one, but I didn't do it alone. This was really a much bigger effort than that. And before I go any further, I just really want to recognize somebody who's not pinned up here, and that is Marcel Dubé, who was the chair of our anthology committee and has done an absolutely stellar job of shepherding this anthology from start to finish. So basically the planning for this anthology began sort of tongue-in-cheek almost immediately after the last one was published. We more a case of, yeah, we're going to do this again, right? And but we got serious about it in the spring of 2021 with the approval of Sisters in Crime Canada West Executive, of which I am also a member. I'm the communications vice president. Most of you who are members of Sisters in Crime Canada West will have received my emails asking for submissions for social media. Anyway, with the approval of the executive, we established an anthology working committee. And that committee was comprised of 6 people, 3 of which were kind enough to agree to become editors for this particular anthology. The first one, we only had 2, but we had many fewer stories than we had this time. As a committee, we agreed, we discussed and agreed upon the theme of women of a certain age. It just sort of made us all smile. And we thought it would be something that could have a wide range of interpretation. So this was also approved by executive. And from there, we sent out a call to our members asking for their submissions. So we received stories in October, November of 2001. The stories were all reviewed blind. In other words, we didn't know as the anthology committee who wrote the stories, but a number of us on the anthology committee had also submitted stories. So in addition to the 6 people who were on the anthology committee, we had the wonderful Isabel McDonald, who has since passed away, but she also reviewed the stories that were written by members of our committee, so that we had and they were all judged based on sort of numerical assessment of qualities of the story. And from there, we chose our 16 stories that appeared in the appear in the anthology.
Did you have any fights, Karen, or did you all agree? Like, how did you? How did you battle it out to get it to 16?
Well, I think it was a case of sometimes with a story, it may not be quite there. And so it was a case of, yeah, we can see the merits of the story. Was somebody prepared to do the work?
I'm going to make dinner in a couple minutes.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt Karen there because I think somebody thinks they're muted and they're not muted. So if everybody could just check to see if you're muted. And Karen, I was loving what you were saying there. So if you could tell us again about the fighting, that was the drama.
I don't think we were actually a very simpatico committee, but there were times when you're looking at a story and some people have things that just trigger them and they don't want to work on that particular story. And other people look at it and go, well, that's not really my type of thing either, or it's going to require some work to work with the author on that story. Or is there somebody on our editorial team who's prepared to do the work with the author? Because we really view publishing these anthologies as a service to our members, so that all of our members who are prepared to put themselves out there get an opportunity to learn from the experience as well. So anyway, we identified the stories and from there set out on the editorial process. As I said, we had 3 primary editors, but we also had 2 junior, I'll call them junior editors or associate editors working with us, because we wanted to, again, prepare for the future when not all of the 3 that are currently editing are prepared to do it, because it was a heck of a pile of work.
How many hours do you think you put into it? How many hours would the team put in? Like hundreds?
I really couldn't say, but it was a lot. There were a lot, even with the stories divided, 16 stories divided by 3. It was a lot of stories to go back and forth on. And some of them, it was very simple. Others, we worked more with the author, and it was fun. It was really fun. There was no point that I wanted to tear my hair out.
Did anybody make you cry? Was there anybody make you laugh out loud?
Made me cry. Nobody,
but I laugh out loud.
But laugh out loud, yes, definitely laugh out loud, yes, definitely. So the 3 editors were myself, Elizabeth Bass, and Jane Bernard. And we worked very well together because we were a team. We each bring our own strengths to the to the editing process. And we were also quite able to come back together and say, you know, I know something's not quite working with this manuscript. Let's, you know, brainstorm together, and we could do that. So kudos to both Liz and Jane, who I hope are here. If they're not, I hope I've said all good things, because they both deserve medals. And our two editors in training were Joanna Vandervoot and also Winona Kent, who also helped with the editorial process and did a great job too.
But you know, I think that's just wonderful, Karen, because the one thing we hear over and over when we're at conferences is how there aren't any good editors anymore, or how editing isn't valued. And so the fact that you're using this to promote the work of some of your members and training, you know, having some editors in training, I think that's just a fantastic goal.
Well,
I'm going to pause. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the thing with editing is that you know, it will serve you well with your own work too, which is really
Absolutely
one of the wonderful things. I mean, it's why I first volunteered to become involved with it.
Yeah, you learn a lot, right? It's from other people's work, and then you take it back to your own. I'm going to pause you just there, Karen, because I know we got a Q&A coming up a little bit later. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell everybody that we're going to be doing a draw at the end. And if I'm wrong about this and we've decided not to do the draw, someone text me and I'll correct myself later. But I want to make sure that everybody knows, if you hang until the very end, we're going to do a draw for a free e-copy of the book. And so, you know, you're not going to want to miss that. So everybody hang in. And I'm thinking, keeping my eye on the clock too, I think I'm going to ask some of the authors to do a little bit of reading right now, just so they can sort of illustrate what you're talking about, Karen. Sure. And then we can talk a little bit about the wide variety that you have and how that worked out and into the story. So I think I'll keep going in the same order I went the last time, and I will put Shelley on the spot to be the first reader. So Shelley, are you ready to go to give us a 2-minute sample of reading from your short story?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
Okay, The Air Affair. The short-range airship to Paris, which carried only 50 passengers, was a pleasing combination of efficiency and comfort. Georgia Brunel, Lady Langford, entered the tea salon and spotted her traveling companion immediately, holding possession of a rattan tea table next to the viewing port. As she crossed the teak floorboards, the deck pressed up under her kidskin boots, causing her knees to bend slightly. She checked the chronometer pinned to her lapel. The schedule had said that they would lift at 2 o'clock, and exactly 2 o'clock it was. Released from its mooring mast, the airship fell up into the clear skies over the field at Hampstead Heath. The Albion Line maintained a sterling reputation for promptness in its service, to the point where one could set one's clocks by its passage over one's roof. At least that was the joke her late husband made on the rare occasions when he was in a good humor. Georgia did not care if the packet were an hour late or even a day. She was free. Once a wife, always a mother, now a widow, a very rich one, thanks to a positively corpulent investment account, which she considered the wages of sin. The sin of staying with him for nearly 20 years. It had been for her son's sake and for Millie's as well, but oh, forward, not back. She took a deep breath and seated herself opposite her traveling companion. What surprises me most about being a widow, she said, is how very enjoyable it is. Lady Langford, this is hardly the place to express such an opinion. Millicent Brunel, her late husband's unmarried aunt, placed her carryall upon the floor and poured Georgia a steaming cup of tea from the waiting pot, a delightful bit of Morvan china with a swirling silver rim that brought to mind clouds and skies. She gauged the distance to the people at the next table, then whispered, though I must say that were I in your position, I would agree.
Very atmospheric, Shelley. I enjoyed that. I almost felt like I was floating. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And now I'm going to ask Miriam Dickon if she can read a little bit of her story. I'm also interested to see what the guilt part is. So Miriam, take us away.
Yeah, I'll be addressing that because I'll be reading a scene from the middle where the main character, Deborah, a cynic who believes romance is for fools, follows her suspects on a guided tour to the Taj Mahal. At the end of an outstretched green oasis rose the mausoleum on a platform. A small canal through the middle of the symmetrical garden was flanked by tall pruned shrubs. The flat water reflected the domes of the Taj Mahal. Several people gasped. The guide flashed a proud grin. The immeasurable beauty and sheer size of the world's most admired monument takes everyone's breath away. Deb coughed. The dry heat scorching their lungs didn't help either. The group walked toward the building, unable to avert their eyes, attracted to its blinding beauty. The Australian lady let out a long sigh. I've never seen anything this beautiful. It's like a floating fairy tale castle. Look at the idyllic arches, the massive amount of marble, the devotion in the decorations. The guide nodded, satisfied. Shah Jahan worked for more than 20 years after his beloved Mumtaz died to build something so grand, so beautiful. You can feel the romance of this ultimate love story, a monumental mourning from a husband who loved his wife so deeply. He brought his hands to his heart. Deb snapped. She was his second wife and shared him with 3 others. Besides, he kept her either pregnant or recovering from childbirth for 18 years straight. She died after being in labor for 30 hours, delivering their 14th child. That building is no labor of love. It's a labor of guilt.
That's wonderful. It's interesting how different our first 2 passages were, and yet they were both about husbands. And maybe we're talking about husbands of a certain age in some ways, and both so beautifully dramatic in describing the scenery. We're off to a really interesting start with such a compare and contrast opportunity. CJ, you're the next one I see on my screen. I'm going to ask you if you would share now.
Middle of my story, no traps, no spray. I ran out the basement door, jumped in my van, and peeled rubber for 5 blocks. 3 things came to mind. Not my house, not my skeleton, not my problem. When I reached home, my heart was beating against my ribs like a caged animal trying to escape. I jumped out of the van and my legs folded under me. I struggled back into the van and grabbed my phone. I'd never had an emergency before. Is a skeleton an emergency? It's not like it's going anywhere. Who do you call for skeletons in basements? I punched 911. The dispatcher connected me to the police. There's a skeleton in the basement at 3824 Holmes Street, I blurted. The owner's name is Angelo Politano. He says he's just moved here from Ottawa. I panicked and hung up. They would trace my call. I didn't care. I was never going back to that house, and I never wanted to see Angelo Politano again. I turned off my phone and stumbled into my house. I knew I might miss some important calls, but I didn't care. I made a cup of tea and laced it with a generous shot of brandy, then collapsed into my armchair. After a few minutes, a warm, fuzzy glow embraced me. It didn't take long for the police to arrive. They asked what I knew about Angelo Politano. I told them he has bugs, mice, squirrels, a skeleton in his basement, and doilies on his tables. They thanked me and left. Life isn't fair. Angel was the first man to tweak my interest in ages, and he had a skeleton in his basement. Just my luck. I remembered old Mrs. Tidsbury's warning. She didn't have a basement, but I wondered what was rattling around in her head. Thank you.
Very funny. I laughed a little out loud at that one myself. So thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, now would you like to share with us? And
all right, sorry. So this is a short piece from The Fair Rosamond and the Summer of Love. George had been 22 when he met Rosamond all those years ago. It had been 1983, and he still had 1 year to go before finishing his accounting certification. On the theory that West Vancouverites were flush for money and would pay well, he had taken a summer job working as a gardener and odd job man at a British properties mansion with spacious grounds and a bewildering maze of terraces. The property was owned by a gray-haired, pot-bellied tyrant whose millions had bought him a trophy wife, a third his age, and an 8-year-old daughter named Rosebud, who took after him in temperament, if not in looks. Unfortunately, the elder tyrant, who appeared to have accumulated his wealth by being reluctant to part with it, expected capability-bound results for slave wages. And his equally autocratic daughter took an instant dislike to George and took every opportunity she could to cause him aggravation. Furthermore, the other members of the household staff considered George to be at the bottom of the pecking order and treated him with disdain. The trophy wife was the consolation for all this grief. The fair Rosamond was barely older than George and as helpless within this narcissistic enclave as he was, since the rest of the staff was still annoyed about her displacement of wife number one. It seemed so unfair that one so sweet and gentle should be bullied from all corners, and the combination of beauty and vulnerability was irresistible. George fell like Tennyson's eagle plummeting towards the wrinkled sea.
Well, Elizabeth, we can definitely tell that you have a theatrical background. That was a wonderful reading. Thank you for sharing it with us. And Lori, would you like to read us a little bit about a little piece from your short story?
Thank you. I'm just going to start my story. I hate the lavender walls in my therapist's office, and that's saying something. I'm well known for my hate. Lavender, lilac, mauve, all pretentious, frilly little girl colors, if you ask me. If you want to calm people down, a nice topper mushroom should do it. I also hate the extra soft, deep square chair I sink into on every visit. Feels like my bottom is resting on the floor and I have to leverage my arms to boost myself up out of it. I suppose being a tiny woman, Anna enjoys having her clients at eye level with her. Right now, she's peering at me in that tell me more kind of way, her chin tilted up and her left eyebrow cocked ever so slightly. I realize she's asking a question, but my mind has wandered again. Her hands are clasped together in a gesture meant to be reassuring. I hate that too. I asked how you felt when you found the evidence of Emma's relationship with this boy on her computer. My stomach gurgles. You can't control your autonomic nervous system. It's embarrassing, and I press my hands together over my traitorous belly. It doesn't matter how I felt. What matters is how she felt about it all. No one seems to care about Emma or what happened to her. I tear up and grab a clean tissue from the box set conveniently on the coffee table. Everyone's interested in me, but it's all about Emma. I blow my nose. Okay, how was Emma when you confronted her about the number of photographs she'd sent to him? I've told you all this before. Raw anger chokes off my throat. Stupid, stupid woman. I hate her, and I hate coming here. None of it is doing me any good. More tears fill my eyes. It's all there in my file. I fist my hands on the arms of the chair. It's all there, and I don't see why I have to go over it again and again. Thank you.
I love a character that thinks the chair at her therapist is too soft. But like right there, it tells me everything I need to know. What a great idea for explaining your character. I think now that we've heard a little piece of 5 different stories in the anthology, I was thinking maybe Karen, I would go back to you. And one question that occurred to me while I was listening to all the readers is the wide variety of settings that we've just experienced. We've just kind of gone around the world there almost really. How important were settings in establishing the stories about women of a certain age? What's the relationship there?
Well, I have a particular penchant for settings. So setting was very important to me. And I think it was to all of the authors because, I mean, or to all of the editors, I should say, because we wanted to really settle the readers right into the story fairly quickly. And with stories like Shelley's, just as an example, not only were we talking about a different place, but a different world, really. And so people had to provide us with enough setting to really ground us as the readers of the for the editors and the committee, the judging committee, or we knew it was something that we need to work with the authors on. And I just have to say they've all done such a wonderful job. They really have. And I just like to mention one of our authors in particular, because this was her first short fiction and her first short fiction publication. And that was Noella McNaughton. And congrats, Noella. It was a great story. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Noella. Congratulations. It's always great when you find a new voice. That's one of the wonderful things about anthologies, right? Is you can find old favorites, you can find new voices, and it's exciting to be in your first anthology too. So congratulations.
Yeah.
And I think I'll ask my panelists a little bit, and again I'll call on everybody one by one. Can you tell us how your story interprets the theme of women of a certain age? And Shelley, we'll have you go first again.
When I hear that phrase, I think of how sort of society at large, after you hit 30 or maybe 35 at the outside, you're kind of on the shelf and nobody really pays attention to what you have to say or what you have to do. And you've got half your life ahead of you and lots to contribute yet. So I set my main character's age at 38 and her aunt at 59, so that they fly around the world solving mysteries. And to me, this was not only enjoying the fruits of your marriage, but also contributing after 35.
Oh, wow. So you put a lot of thought into it. That sounds really interesting. Miriam, was it the same for you? How did you approach the theme of women of a certain age?
Yeah, I think a little bit similar in the sense that for me, it had to do with, women with enough life experience to not want to abide by somebody else's rules anymore. And making up their own, making up their own rules.
Right. Fight the patriarchy, right? That's what we're all about.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what about you? How did you approach the theme?
Really hard to answer that without actually giving away the twist in my story. All I can say is that a while back, I'd had an idea about a meeting at the ferry terminal that did in a way relate to, an older woman. And then when this subject came up, I thought, oh, that will fit beautifully. I can write this story. But beyond that, I can't say it because it really would give away the whole theme of my story.
Good for you. I should have said at the beginning, no spoilers. No one's going to hear any spoilers tonight. So it won't ruin your enjoyment of the book, especially if you win the free copy that we're giving away at the end of the session. CJ, what about you? How did you interpret the theme?
Women of a certain age is a vague reference to women who don't wish to advertise their age. They don't want to be judged by how old they are. They just want to be taken for what they are. And like they're no longer young, but they're not yet ready for the pine box. So they're kind of, they've got a lot more to give and they've learned a lot already. So that's sort of how I look at it. And they don't want their age advertised because it's not relevant to who they are.
Oh, I like that. Irrelevant. That's great. That's a great approach. And Lori, what about you in terms of the theme? How did you interpret that theme, women of a certain age?
Well, I can't give I'd be giving away a spoiler, but when I started writing the story, I started writing it in one way, specifically writing about the mom in her 40s to 50s in a specific way. And as I started researching the story, I found out that it wasn't going to work that way. So I had to change tactics.
Yeah, why not? Why wasn't it going to work? Wait, what wasn't working for you?
Well, if I tell you, it'll be the spoiler for my.
Oh, okay. No spoilers. No spoilers.
I can't tell you. Yeah, so basically I had to pivot. But so I guess, you know, what I was looking at was a mom of a certain age, not quite middle age, but a mom of a daughter who was plenty old enough, but still you're always a mom, no matter how old your kid is, right? Your
Yep,
mom,
yep.
you're always a mom, no matter how old. So that's how
that's an interesting take. I like that. Yeah, that's a really great idea. And what did you, I'm going to go in reverse order back again. So I'm going to ask you the next question. What did you learn yourself, do you think, Lori, about women of a certain age while you were thinking about that topic for this story?
I think I learned that when you get to a certain age, you don't have to worry anymore about what other people think of you in terms of your beauty, your image, what other people think of you. When you can get past that, you know, some women never get past that adolescent stage, but hopefully you grow out of it and you become your own self and have your own self-identity.
Mm-hmm. There is something kind of relaxing about it, isn't it? When you like, I remember one of my friends leaning over to me and saying, Therese, I've decided to just let myself go. And I thought, good for you. I get what you're saying. CJ, what about you? What did you learn about women of a certain age while you were thinking about the theme?
I learned that a woman's biological age should not be permitted to dictate her beliefs, attitudes, character, or behavior. She should be who she is and not have her age as a filter for everything.
You mean her own filter or the filter of other people?
Well, she shouldn't have to filter herself, and she shouldn't have to deal with other people's either. You are who you are, and that's it, kind of. And your age has nothing to do with it.
I like it.
I learned that because I've met a lot of older people that I really admire and respect, and they seem to have that attitude.
Right. They're authentically themselves. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, what about you? What have you learned about the theme?
Well, actually, the thing that I learned was looking up and finding where the quote came from, which was Lord Byron's poem, Don Juan. And, you know, and finding the actual quote where it came from, which, do you want me to read it?
I was just going to say, you wouldn't happen to have that in front of you, would you?
Yeah, she was not old nor young, nor at the years which certain people call a certain age, which yet the most uncertain age appears. So it was perfect also for what I'm doing with my story. So that's actually what I learned. When it comes to age, I've never really considered it important. I'm lucky enough to be married to somebody who thinks women are beautiful no matter what age they are, if they've got nice characters, right? So it's never been an issue for me, but I did incorporate in the story, because it was so timely, so many of my friends with COVID and the lockdowns, we couldn't go to the hairdresser, we couldn't get the hair dye, right? And suddenly we all went natural. And that was, you know, kind of revealing, very freeing. And so it was kind of nice to incorporate that into the story too.
Oh, right. That's a nice point. Right. Yeah, we're still reflecting on what the pandemic has meant for our writing and what our characters are doing and that sort of thing. But that's an interesting
and a lot
analogy.
of my friends said it was liberating. Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
And Miriam, what about you? What have you learned about women from a certain age? And now I'm going to say, because I come from a long line of very strong and powerful Dutch women. And do you think being Dutch gives you a different perspective on it? I'm giving you a double barrel question. What do you think?
I'm not sure if there's a different perspective, but your comment does remind me of this T-shirt that I saw somewhere. You know, you don't scare me. I grew up with a Dutch mother.
Yeah, I love that T-shirt.
And I can relate to that. Yeah. But I think that's what I learned, and what the character learns in the story is that despite self-confidence growing, I think for many women when growing older, it doesn't mean that you don't have to learn anything anymore. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you know everything. So that was for me the takeaway. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's it's a different kind of exploration and discovery, right? That's a really neat point. And Shelley, what's your thoughts on that?
Just sitting here, I realized that my heroine, Georgia, is 38, and that's the same age as when I had my midlife crisis. So what I am planning for her to do is she's always thought of herself in terms of men, like I am the mother of Teddy, I was the wife of the Baron, I was the daughter of so-and-so. Now she's going to be defining herself on her own terms by what she can become. So that's the beginning of her arc, and that's how I think of it.
Oh, that's beautiful. And Karen, I'll end with you here on this particular note. Now you've just read all 16 different stories, well, more than 16, but 16 published stories about women of a certain age. Did it change anything about the way you think about women of a certain age?
Well, certainly, I mean, the diversity of perspectives and personalities and how being a woman of a certain age affects individuals really came through, and it resonated because I'm certainly a woman of a certain age too. Yeah. But it was also really refreshing to see that based on what was Lord Byron's original quote, that we actually had stories that involved a protagonist who was much younger than basically a child, and extremely powerful story. So really, I think being a woman of a certain age is almost being a woman of any age and coming into who you are and realizing something very powerful about yourself. So that's sort of where I ended up after reading all the stories, etc.
Yeah, I love that. That's the experience I want to have too. So I want to, just come into myself reading these stories and realizing all the things I need to be doing and should be doing. And that's wonderful. Now I'm going to turn over just for a second. I'm going to ask our diligent people working on the tech support, because we're coming up to a quarter after the hour. And so if we want to have a little time for questions from our listeners, this would be the time that we segue into that. So back to our question, which is, how do the editors harmonize the stories so they sound like they came from the same family, even though they are clearly not the same? And that is a great question, I think, for an anthology editor. So Karen, what do you think?
Well, having different editors, I mean, you're always going to have a little bit of a different take on stories. But what we did as an editorial team was we shared stories after we were what we thought were close to the final editorial process. We would share the stories with the other editors so that we could get any final input into it, which allowed any things that we didn't individually pick up on, we could do as a team, and then take it in or take it back to the author and have it addressed. And really, I think that a lot of the consistency through the stories, etc., I have to say probably comes from the very good copy editing and proofing that we had as well, to make sure there was consistency in style and so on through the anthology. So I really want to thank Shelley, who was one of our proof copy editor types, and what is it, Catherine Bianco as well, who also did a lot of that work for us too.
Oh, good,
So,
good copy editors are worth their weight in gold. We all know
yes,
that.
and
so, yeah.
our illustrious chairperson, Marcel Dubé, I think if she has to read the anthology again, she may go blind. She has proved it so many times. So, yes, yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one final question, and that is probably what everybody's wondering about, but they're too afraid to ask because it's too early. Are you going to do another anthology? Will there be another one?
Well, I am not the decision maker on that. I think it will be the executive, which I am withdrawing from at the end of this year. I think that we've been very successful with our first two anthologies. The first one, Elizabeth won the Crime Writers of Canada a certificate or award of excellence for her short story. We've had, really, was it, pardon me, maybe I got that
Marcel,
wrong.
it was
That
Marcel.
Marcel. Sorry, boy, I'm just losing it. It was Marcel that won for our first anthology. So, and these are very strong stories that we've got across the board. In this anthology. I think we are all very, very proud of it. So I hope the chapter does it again. I think we're all hoping that we'll see the same sort of interest in submitting stories for awards and hopefully getting some recognition for our members, because we have some really fantastic authors in our chapter. And yeah. So it's been a long journey, and I'm really going to be glad when it's all done. And I think Marcel and I will have 2 glasses of wine together.
Said every editor ever. Eh?
Yeah, but yeah, it's been good.
Wonderful.
But I think that's something executive will probably have to have a discussion about in January, and then they'll have to go looking for their committee.
That's wonderful. So everybody online, think about your volunteer time here. There will be the people will be looking for a yes. I think that's a really good place for us to wrap up the discussion today.
Therese, thank you so much for moderating this event. As always, you're a fantastic moderator and bring out the best in everyone. And all of our authors and all of the members that have attended, thanks very much. And sharpen your pencils, because the next anthology is not far away. So with that, I'll stop the recording.